and welcome back to the Warwick F1 Show. Obviously, we did take a break over the winter season, winter being traditionally downtime for F1, no races until March. And yeah, so we've shortened the show. It's just an hour long now. And we'll obviously be discussing everything that can happen during the off-season when the cars come back. A few teams having announced their car launches for the middle of February now. I think we've had 4 so far, 6 more on their way. And we'll get testing, and then we'll dive back into it with the Bahrain Grand Prix, which opens the season in a few months' time. But despite the races not having taken place, there has been news across the F1 grid. We have had the FIA has taken a stance on political statements in the sport, banning drivers from making political statements without their approval. So still allowed to make statements, but do need to get the FIA's approval for them. So obviously what we think of that, we had a team principal silly season. We get a driver silly season sort of around the middle of the season, but this time the team principals wanted to have a go, and a lot of principals moving around. Frederic Vasseur going to Ferrari, replacing Mattia Binotto. Jos Capito leaving Williams. Obviously Fred Vasseur leaving Alfa Romeo, and Andreas Seidel going to represent the CEO of the new Sauber team, with the idea of getting it ready for Audi's arrival in 2026. We have also had one more piece of news as well that I have now forgotten. Yeah, I've got it. So obviously we have also had Andretti striving forward with their bid to join F1, joining up with Cadillac, the luxury GM General Motors car brand in America, to try and get a application to become an F1 team in 2026, put together part of a wider sort of drive among many companies to sort of get into F1 a bit more. Ford have expressed interest of building an engine linked with Red Bull. Panthera Team Asia, also another team that has also another group that has expressed interest in joining the sport. And obviously Porsche's failed entry in for the next few seasons hasn't put them off being interested in the sport as well, and seems to be part of a wider range of teams getting into the sport. We've seen a lot of interest in the World Endurance Championship over the next few years. Ferrari and Porsche dropping back into the newly revamped hypercar class. Chinmay will be along in a second, but he unfortunately has to finish off an exam, so he'll be along about halfway through the show. But I have got, I'm hesitant to say a competent replacement. Rightly so. But I've got a replacement. I know him from mixed hockey, and he's getting into F1. He's one of the new fans that the sport has been pushing towards, and I previously tried to convert him. He said it was boring, and then he has grown up and realised the error of his ways. How are you doing, Jono?
Oh, I'm very good, thank you. Very happy to come along and attempt to offer at least some vaguely considered comment on matters that I am actually not at all competent in. But I'm sure the show will...
This is like me when I talk about cricket.
Absolutely. Well, this is going to be embarrassing then for me.
What? That's just rude. But, I mean, we may as well start off. How did you get into F1? Was it incessant badgering from me?
Yeah, no, good bit of badgering. No, I'll be honest, it was sort of out of nowhere. I turned around and everyone else was into it. I don't know if you've been into it for a long time, but it's for people who haven't. You know, we suddenly turn around and have realised that everyone else watches the F1, so you might as well watch it as well.
Yes, I've probably been into it since probably
you were
less
there before it was cool.
Yeah, I was actually. Probably less so in the early 2010s, and then it grew, obviously, as I grew, and watched all the races from now. I reckon I'm relatively confident that if you gave me a race from 2014 to now, I could probably tell you who won it.
Well, if I think of any of the races, no. Okay, hang on, there's a challenge here. Do they have? Which one is Imola still a thing?
Imola's only been on the calendar for 3 seasons now, so that should be quite easy.
Oh no, okay.
Well, I can tell you who won all the Imola. So 2020 was Hamilton. Then 2021 was Verstappen, and then this year was also Verstappen.
I could have guessed that.
With a Grand Slam victory.
No, well, the thing is, you've not got someone here to dispute that, so I'm sure that it's true.
No,
we would trust
true.
Verstappen
was in. I think Verstappen was in second place, and then in 2020, and then he had a tyre blowout and spun out into the gravel. The 2021 and 2022 races both started in the wet and then went to dry running. Lewis Hamilton finished 13th in 2022 after being stuck behind Pierre Gasly for the majority of the race.
For the people listening at home, I do know who all those people are.
No, you don't.
I've heard of Pierre Gasly.
Why?
He's one of the drivers.
Do you know which race? Hang on. Do you know which race he won?
I didn't know. Oh, was it? It was a few months ago.
No.
A couple of months ago.
No, it wasn't this year.
A couple of months ago. I remember someone won their first one quite recently. Am I thinking?
Yes. Do you know which driver? George Russell.
Oh, okay.
The British driver.
That was one of the first races I fully watched and rather enjoyed.
No, you didn't. Oh wait, well I was in
Venice, watching.
Oh, we watched it in Danny King's flat.
Oh wow!
It was me, Chris, and him. I was very annoyed when Verstappen hit Lewis Hamilton.
Oh yeah, there was much discussion about that. None of which I understood, but it's a learning curve.
But who do you support?
Lando Norris, because I'm a Star Wars fan, and he's called Lando.
Is he named after?
I should hope so, but I highly doubt it.
Well, yeah, you're a Star Wars fan, and I don't know, make about what you will, but we'll dive in. We'll dive into it. Obviously, with the news that did take place over the winter. We'll start with the one probably that you'll be most fine with talking about. So the FIA banning drivers from making political statements without their approval. So a new article in the International Sporting Code, which is basically the big rule book for all motorsport ever. The version this year, Article 12.2.1.n.
Lovely.
Nice and wordy, states that drivers will be deemed to have committed a breach of the rules if they show, and I quote, the general making and display of political, religious and personal statements or comments notably in violation of the general principle of neutrality promoted by the FIA under its statutes, unless previously approved in writing by the FIA for international competitions or by the relevant ASN for national competitions within their jurisdiction. Nice and wordy.
Yeah,
but basically, that can be summarised as drivers cannot make political statements without approval from the FIA. We've seen a number of drivers making statements in the past. Sebastian Vettel, very vocal in his support of LGBTQ plus rights and the environment over the last year. And then in 2020, obviously in the wake of the George Floyd protests, Lewis Hamilton doing a number of protests, having Black Lives Matter on his helmet. In the Tuscan Grand Prix in Mugello, he wore a T-shirt that said "Arrest the cops who killed Breonna Taylor." A woman who was killed by police I think in 2020 or 2019. And yes, Lewis Hamilton's very outspoken in support of Black Lives Matter and general support for general support against racism. I mean, do you think that they should have to get the FIA's approval to protest, or obviously comes under free speech, you'd think, and maybe they shouldn't?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's very interesting. The relevance of this is probably the reason it's popped in quite recently. Is obviously we've seen Qatar as quite a kind of focus point for people making these statements, and you've got a lot of people on one side of the debate sort of. It's sport. It's not supposed to be political. There shouldn't have any politics in this. Let's ban it. But I don't know. I think it's free speech, and people have have these platforms that they've managed, they've worked hard to get to. But I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know much about the FIH. I think you said, are they
FIA Fédération Internationale de Autosport. Hang on, I may.
There's a D in there.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know much about the governing body. I don't know how accountable they are, or how.
So So it's the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile. It's French.
Oh, rubbish. I don't like it then. No. No, I think it's interesting. It's again a question of, these people aren't our elected representatives. They're not people we look to make political statements. They're not people we look to guide us in terms of sort of moral issues, I think.
But I mean, obviously it's not banning them, and you'd assume that some obviously it says religious statements there. Without approval, you'd assume a driver wouldn't be able to wear a cross. I think Pierre Gasly, the driver we mentioned earlier, I'm pretty sure wears a cross, obviously, or during his races, obviously, to appeal to his faith. He'll need permission to do that now. And although you'd assume that the FIA might give drivers permission. For example, Lewis Hamilton, I think it was one of the races at the back end of the season, might have been Brazil, did wear a rainbow helmet, obviously in support of LGBTQ plus rights. Sebastian Vettel, very outspoken, as we've said. It gives the FIA the option to not say yes, in a way.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that they've decided to sort of take the responsibility on that, because previously, if this is obviously coming now, then whether those protests people generally thought were well judged, or I'm sure they were, but they've now decided to take responsibility for these situations. So, the pressure then, if they choose to deny a driver the opportunity to make a political statement, will fall on them. So I think it's a very interesting decision on their part.
Yeah.
But no, I think I'll be surprised if obviously we see them saying no to a lot of things, because I don't know. It's interesting. It's a global sport. Global attitudes are different. People have different views and beliefs across the world. Sort of stuff that we take for granted maybe in our country is not the same in others. So they've got to sort of manage that kind of variation. But yeah, them taking responsibility for it is something I find very interesting. Instead of kind of letting it be as it was with people being able to make statements of their own accord. But yeah, I'll be interested to see. I'm sure the first time they deny someone the opportunity to make a political statement, that will flare up very quickly.
Yeah, and just to finish off, and we'll take a quick break after this. Do you think it will maybe change whether the FIA allow or deny protests based on the location that we race in? As you mentioned there, obviously a lot was made of the protests that footballers wanted to do in Qatar, or FIFA banning a lot of them, some European teams, I think 10, not being allowed to wear the One Love wristband for fear of getting a yellow card at the start, or the captains getting a yellow card at the start of the games. So do you think that maybe if we're in Britain, for example, where we obviously have a lot more freedoms in terms of LGBTQ plus rights, for example, these protests may be allowed more, but when we go to countries like Saudi Arabia, when we go to Qatar next year, when we go to Hungary as well, where LGBTQ plus rights are curtailed a bit more, do you think the FIA maybe put under pressure by local authorities to say no if drivers attempt to ask approval for these protests?
Yeah, I certainly think so. I think that's I'm imagining now that, thinking about why this has come in, that pressure's come from outside to encourage them to try and regulate these things a bit more. But I think, they'll have to manage those differences. But it's in those places that these people making these protests are certain that they're most needed. It's all well and good, coming over, in England and doing an LGBT Q plus protest stuff. It's obviously the campaign and stuff needs as much attention as it can get, but in places, as you mentioned, like Hungary or Qatar, for example, it really is. That's the place where it really needs to be as visible as possible. So, I'll be interested to see what they do with that in the future, but I suspect they'll get themselves into hot water with that quite a lot, because obviously these places have got their own laws and their own sovereignty and stuff, and they'll want to keep a lid on these sorts of things. So that's one to look out for the future, I think.
It is, and obviously it will probably be issue in 2023, although Sebastian Vettel has retired. Lewis Hamilton still on the grid, still outspoken for social justice issues across the globe. We are going to take another quick break now, and we will come back and we'll talk about the new additions to F1. Obviously, Andretti General Motors putting together a full plan to join the sport. Welcome back to the Warwick F1 Show. I've just been being quizzed on F1 races because I did say that I could name any winner from 2014 to 2022. I reckon I could definitely get about 80%, I reckon. But maybe not perfect, but we'll go from there. We have been joined by Chinmay, my ever-dependent co-host. How are you?
I'm good.
How was your Christmas?
Busy. Now the exams are over, I'm fine.
Are they done? Today was
the last one.
Day.
I've just finished my last one. I'm so happy now.
And we're also joined by Shane as well. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I do engineering as well, so just finished my last exam. I'm very, very happy.
Yeah, I think Chris had his last exam today, didn't he?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
But he's also got tonsillitis, so...
Sorry,
it's what it is.
We wish him well. He's not...
Some of us do. Actually, that's harsh.
What do you mean? We all wish him well. All right, so let's dive into the Andretti General Motors bid to join the sport. So, Andretti to Formula One has been rumbling on for a number of months now. So back in Miami, and Michael Andretti tried to get all the F1 teams to sign on, saying basically, we'll join the sport. Only two of them did, Alpine and McLaren. Everyone else was like, what are you doing? But everyone else sort of just went, go away, find a car company, and then we'll consider it. And they've done that. They've found General Motors, one of the largest car manufacturers in America, and they have linked up with them to front it as Andretti and Cadillac, so the luxury car company under the General Motors marquee. But it seems that teams are still unhappy with it, Chinmay.
One word, money.
Yes.
It's the only reason why they're against it, because the problem is, even though F1 is growing, the existing stakeholders, the F1 constructors, they want to earn as much money as possible, because at the end of the day, these teams are running as a business.
Yeah.
And the fact that if you get an 11th team on the grid, everyone's going to get a smaller piece of the pie. So that's the biggest opposition to, even though Andretti have the money and the potential for the expansion of the American market because of another American team, and the fact that because they're much more financially stable than Haas, they're more likely to actually be competitive, because especially now they've got the backing of one of America's biggest manufacturers with General Motors, and that's the Cadillac division as well, so that's no slouch. Yeah, it's more to do with money than anything else, really. Yeah,
obviously F1 teams get prize money for where they finish, and if a team wants to join, they have to pay $200 million to join the sport as essentially compensation for diluting that prize pool. For anyone that doesn't watch F1 and maybe watches football, I'm just referring to Jonna here. It's essentially like if a 21st team joined the Premier League, and then they paid everyone else money, because obviously the prize money would be less. Does that make sense?
Makes sense, yeah.
Yes.
Completely.
But the teams, and I'm quoting obviously the BBC article, which I would actually recommend everyone reading, the teams want that cost to be more. So 200 million is about 2 years of prize money, and they'd rather it be a figure closer to 600 or 700 million dollars, representing more like 5 years. And there is a precedent. So in the NHL, so America's ice hockey league, a new team joining costs $650 million. So there is precedent for it to be more. And Shane, I think you think about 200 million. That's a lot of money. But when you consider it, you'd almost have to say that isn't, for an F1 team, F1 being an exceptionally expensive sport, 200 million isn't the most amount of money to compensate teams, is it?
It's not, and with the cost cap every year being 160 million, I believe, an entry fee of 200 million shows that you actually have the funds available to run a successful team, and not one that's just 6 or 7 seconds off the back of the pace every race. So yeah, I think 200 million is a reasonable number for an entry fee.
Yeah, and we've seen it in the past, and I think that's another thing teams and perhaps the FIA are concerned about. Obviously, the best example is probably being in 2010 when 3 new teams joined the sport: HRT, Caterham, or I think it was Lotus back then, and Virgin Racing, or Marussia, or Manor, or whatever they were called in every other season. Those 3 teams were never really on the pace, and we saw them all eventually collapse. So HRT leaving the sport in 2013 or 2012?
It's somewhere around that time.
Yeah, 2012, 2013. Caterham leaving the sport in 2014, and Manor, as they ended up being called, finishing in 2016. And I mean, having those teams, you're a Southampton fan. They are bottom of the league.
Rock bottom
of the league. I'm bringing it to football to get you more involved because you know more about football. When you're bottom of the league, it's a bit embarrassing, isn't it?
Not if you're used to it, no.
You're not used to it.
No, it is what it is, but it means when you're supporting a team that's not as good, you're not too worried about winning the big prize. Which means you can enjoy it week by week. I don't know if that's the case with people supporting teams in F1. Lesser teams, you enjoy sort of a 5th or a 6th, maybe now and again.
It depends on the competitiveness of the car.
Yeah.
So probably like McLaren, 5th or 6th is excellent. But if you're like Red Bull, 5th or 6th is
dross, exactly.
Yeah, and it also, I guess, it brings the sport it makes the sport look less good if not everyone is competitive. And that does seem to be what the teams are concerned about. I mean, would you want another team in F1? Do you think Jono, from your limited watching, do you think 20 drivers is a good amount?
I would just say that what you said about the quality there is that obviously as the more teams you introduce, the lesser the quality overall, and it's not a sport that I don't see it, at least as a sort of a new fan. It's kind of, I wouldn't say that it's too important to have as many people doing it as possible. F1 by its nature is not a very sort of inclusive sport. If you think about it, we can't all go out and play F1, but we could go down the field and kick a football around.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. So I think that the highest level of competition is what people want from F1. And if you introduce more teams, that might encourage others to buck their ideas up, and everyone gets better. But if you don't know, then I'm sure the other teams will want to play it safe.
Yeah, I mean, really, for me, it really just depends on what really you can add to the table as such, because, like you said, more stuff can generally lessen the quality. But then, if you're something like Audi. And say, for example, if Audi were going to bring in a new team, it wouldn't be too much of an issue because, Audi, especially they've got the powerhouse of Volkswagen behind them, they've got the history, they've got the finances, they've got the personnel, or the ability to recruit personnel to make the things competitive. Even though it doesn't guarantee success, I mean, we'd look at Honda when they've rejoined the sport in 2015, and everyone, especially when they reunited with McLaren, everyone was so looking forward to be reminiscent back in the late 80s with Senna, but then obviously it ended up being an absolute disaster and Honda took 5 years to become competitive and produce a race-winning engine. So yeah.
I agree with the two next to me saying that it could decimate the quality of the teams, but at the same time, you've got so many top-level drivers who don't have a seat right now. You've got Kvyat, who left the sport in 2020. You've got Colton Herta from America. You've got Theo Pourchaire, who's in F2, and Mick Schumacher, who recently got dropped by Haas.
Yeah.
All quality drivers who I believe still should have an F1 seat, and more teams would allow them to.
But the only question I'll pose is there really any point if you're just going to be lugging around in the back of the grid for the whole year, like pretty much Williams have been doing for 3 years? Because if you're looking at it that way, then is there really any point?
That is true, but at least it does give an entryway for these drivers to actually reach F1, like some of the F2 drivers who are absolutely quality.
Yeah,
and
100%.
they can't go into the top level teams just yet.
Yeah, I mean it's not only Andretti that's looking to join the sport. Ford looking to join the sport in some respects with talks with Red Bull about sort of joining it and then becoming their own independent outfit. Panthera Team Asia, another group rumoured to join the sport. I think maybe more scepticism over them, obviously very similar to what we've seen in the past, especially with HRT. And having a big car company isn't a guarantee of success. We've seen it earlier in the 2000s. Jaguar did end up becoming Red Bull, but Jaguar weren't especially good. The late 2000s with BMW, Williams, they were very good, or they were better, but then they dropped out of the sport. Toyota, Honda had their own outfit and then also dropped out. Do you think maybe, Chinmay, and we'll probably finish it off here because we want to talk about the team principles as well, do you think that maybe F1 needs to strike a fine line, maybe between allowing new teams into the sport but also not diminishing that quality? Because at the moment you look at new teams coming into a motorsport, you look to the World Endurance Championship, which has seen a glut of new entries coming into the sport. Ferrari have put together a car, Porsche put together a car, BMW, and then smaller entries as well. Vanwall, Glickenhaus, Alpine, still part of the Sport Peugeot as well, and probably even more that I've forgotten about. Do you think that maybe WEC has gone to the extreme of everyone is allowed in, and to be fair, that's right, because obviously you look at the World Endurance Championship over the last few years, in the top class, LMD8 or LMP1 did suffer a bit from lack of competitiveness, and but now they've got loads more, whereas F1 has maybe got 10 teams and should maybe tread a bit more carefully when allowing new teams into what is a very, very technically is the pinnacle of technical advances in a way.
Yeah, and I suppose with F1, especially compared to WEC, it's financial situations, because that's what drives most of the teams out of F1 to begin with. Toyota, Honda, we're talking about HRT, Marussia, especially those sort of teams. I think the problem, there needs to be a fine line, because at the end of the day, one of F1's specialities is the exclusivity of the sport, the fact that we don't have many team changes. But I think especially there comes a time where we just don't want dominance by a single team, which we've seen way too much of in the last 13 years of the sport, ever since 2010. We've only had dominance by two different teams. So I would say I would definitely need to be welcoming to more entries, but also need to just have the financial capabilities and check as well.
Yeah, and obviously, as with the political statements that we spoke about earlier, this will be a story that runs on ultimately for the next almost 3 years until 2026, when these new teams would be looking to join. Obviously, we have had one confirmed, Audi taking over Sauber, but whether we see any more remains to be seen. We will play another song now, and then we'll come back and talk about the team principals silly season. The drivers had it, and now the team principals wanted in, and we will discuss all of that. we are now going to jump into the team principal silly season, a concept never before seen before December 2022. Lots of team principals moving jobs. Probably the biggest one was Binotto leaving Ferrari to be replaced by Freddie Vasseur. I'm trying to think of the best football analogy for our resident new person. It's like if... Anyone got any ideas? Who's a bit of an incompetent... It's like when Ole left and he's been replaced by... It actually is. It's like when Ole left and was replaced by Ten Hag. It was like someone that's been there for a bit too long and is a bit incompetent and being replaced by someone that seems a lot more competent in their job. But yes...
Yeah, no, I've been watching it for the last few months, and I don't know, when I was younger, I just always assumed Ferrari won everything, and they aren't at the moment. So
you're so naive. They don't win.
Don't win a thing.
They don't win a thing. But yeah, I mean, Binotto leaving, it seemed expected.
It was inevitable. Let's be honest. I think, yeah, the problem I don't think the problem is Binotto entirely, is the entire Ferrari team structure, and especially the strategy department.
Well, apparently, I saw a report this morning, their chief strategist has apparently gone as well. It's like Ineki Saeda or something, I think. But yeah, I think he's gone. Yes, Ferrari strategy, let's just say, was not the best. I think they had, how many races? There were 22 races. I'd say at least half of them they make some sort of blunder.
No, I was probably say about 3/4 of them, probably.
No, I'd say maybe 2/3, and then like another 1/6 was Charles Leclerc bidding it in a wall of some description, and then like they had a 1/6 of the race, like 3 races where they didn't mess up.
Yeah.
But no, and Vasseur, I think that could be a really... Because Vasseur's never really been one, Shane. He's been there, he's been sensible, he's been quietly doing his job.
He's more of a back channeler in that.
More of a back channel. It seems like the perfect signing for Ferrari.
It does, going from Alfa Romeo to Ferrari is pretty, like everyone could see that one coming. Like that was the obvious replacement. But also, I'm not entirely sure about his ability to run Ferrari. Like with Alfa Romeo, Sauber, it's always been a very mid team, and hasn't seen much improvement. So, well, let's see what he can do at Ferrari.
I think. But another problem with Vasseur is going to face now. He's not going to He's not going to have the same amount of power that Binotto had, because I think the Ferrari senior management are going to take a much bigger role in sort of leading the team, which isn't really a good idea. Because you look at all the other team principals, i.e. Toto Wolff and Christian Horner, who are the team principals of Mercedes and Red Bull entirely. They have pretty much complete control of how the team is run. And you can see that, whereas Ferrari has like 15 million different people running the team, and you can see all the disarray in Ferrari. And so, let's just say the machines that Mercedes and Red Bull are, even though Mercedes didn't build as good of a car, you can just see how good the operation is compared to Ferrari.
Yeah. And then, as well as that, so Williams or Joss Capito left Williams. I mean, it's Williams.
Yeah.
They're just at the back.
Yeah, from my limited understanding of the sport,
they used to be good.
They're a bit dross.
But now they're bad. They're like the Sunderland of Formula One. Probably good. I'm just bringing football knowledge into it now. But yeah, so Joss Capito, they appointed a replacement, but I mean...
Yeah.
They've got to work out how to improve.
Yeah, apparently he wasn't actually doing a good job there anyways, from what I've heard.
We kept Latifi in a drive for quite a long time. That's probably not the best way of doing it. Then the next few ones sort of related. So Andreas Seidel leaving McLaren to be replaced by Andreas Stella. I don't know much about Andreas Stella.
Yeah, I think to be fair, it seems a really good option. It seems to be a good option because the fact that, McLaren have recruited in-house, which basically means, the entire sort of like steps that Seidel set, Stella can pretty much just pick it up and carry it on, because Stella was pretty much been around. He's been in the circuit that sort of built McLaren, that rebuilt McLaren after Zach Brown took over and everything. So I think, obviously we don't know how well he will do as a team principal, but the fact that it's a lot of streamlined because McLaren have recruited in-house, I think, there's still good hopes for that team, and he does have a good track record as well.
Yeah. I mean, Shane, McLaren were with Ferrari, obviously, in 2021, left behind by them in 2022. Sort of top end of the midfield, but were beaten by Alpine in the end. Do you think that their aims, I guess, over the next few seasons, beat Alpine again and then climb back up to that top step?
I think, their aim is definitely on top of the midfield. I don't think they're planning on breaking into the top three anytime soon. But yeah, like Chinmay said, I think recruiting in-house is the best option for them. But I did not see Andrea Seidel leaving McLaren. I did not expect that whatsoever.
Yeah. I'm going to disagree with that. I actually see that coming, but I think because the position open at Alfa Romeo opened up quite early, because obviously Audi's taking over, it kind of makes a lot of sense, German going to German. So I think, to be honest, I did see Seidel actually moving, because Seidel also did say that he's not going to renew. Already said that he's not renewing his contract at the end of which was expiring at the end of 2025.
But Seidel hasn't become a team principal.
No,
he has become the CEO of the Sauber Group. Obviously, you'd assume that when Audi do take over, he is then the one to report to Audi, and he needs to find a team principal. I think, as you said, having a German to run essentially what is going to become Audi is what they were looking for. I know Audi have stated that they do want a German driver of some description in their car for 2026. I mean, the signs would look at Mick Schumacher as being that German driver. Nico Hülkenberg will still somehow be in the running, despite the fact he'll be ancient by then. I don't think there are any German drivers coming up from F2 as far as I can think.
Not as far as I know. Vettel coming out of retirement. Because, with the rate of, especially with the rate of legends coming out of retirement, you had Schumacher and Mercedes, Alonso with Alpine, and we probably could have. I'll be the least surprised person if Vettel does come and race for Audi.
Yeah, and I mean, they do seem to be building towards 2026 for Sauber, and it does feel like. I'll bring it to football to that, John. It feels like, how Newcastle is sort of building up with Saudi Arabian money. Yeah. Sort of like that.
I did have one question. Obviously. This kind of stuff, we're talking about changes, you're talking about new principles and stuff, and building to 2026. I'm assuming it's obviously very technical sport. Stuff just takes a long time in F1.
There are new regulations coming in 2026. So new engines and aero. General criticisms of the cars have been they're too big because they are elephants. Especially when you compare them to cars in 2008 that are a lot more smaller. B, the cars have been they're too quiet. Obviously, compared to the V8s and V10s of the past, the V6s that we have currently are not the loudest, and C, they're not the most environmentally friendly. So new regulations are coming in to bring the size of the car down, make the car more focused on still a hybrid, but the hybrid system to be made a lot more simpler, to bring costs down as well. And also to potentially, and it's looking like, run them on biofuel. So the cars running on track will be net zero.
Okay, so
obviously everything.
Is that something that people are concerned about in the environmental? Because
F1 as a sport looks a bit out of place with the whole.
Exactly. The cars are going to drive 70 laps on net zero, but then all the teams are going to fly on massive planes all over the world. So
yes, but F1 technology has traditionally been a precursor to normal car technology. The hybrid systems used in 2014 have made their way in. Obviously a lot more simplistic formats to road cars, and the hope is biofuels will do the same thing to the road format. Any other I don't think there's more team principles. Got anything else?
No, nothing at the moment. I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, we'll wait and see. Team principles have already been decided. Obviously Williams and Alfa Romeo do need team principles, so we'll keep up to date with who they are over the next few weeks. We have a bumper schedule coming up over the next few weeks. We'll be looking back on the wonderful career of Sebastian Vettel, rating our top 10 drivers of last season. What other ideas did we propose that I've now instantly forgotten?
F1 for new fans.
F1 for new fans, with our new fan in here. Jono will be thinking of lots of questions he has, and we'll be explaining them to him. And obviously, when we get into the start of the season, week 7 being the opening weekend, or the weekend of week 7. No, it's week 8.
What are you looking for? Early March?
Yeah.
Early March,
or was it
week 8.
The 5th to the 8th?
No, it's Thursday the 5th. 5th is the Warwick Grand Prix, so that should be week 8.
Yes, week 8. So week 8 will be the opening race of the season. So we'll in week 9. We'll obviously be covering that race. Thank you for Jono for filling in.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for putting up with my lack of competence.
It's fine. I think we often assume that everyone listening is well versed in F1, but if there are any new people listening, you are you're the conduit for any questions that they may have. As ever, thank you to Chinmay for coming on, helping me host, and thinking of lots of ideas that we can bore you all with for the next week. I think it should be good. It should be good. I think
it'll be fun.
We've got lots of ideas, and I think they should work. And thank you to Shane as well for coming on, filling in. Was it second time?
Second time. Yeah.
And you should be coming back. It's always fun. I know obviously anyone listening is welcome to come on.